Welcome to A Therapist, a Buddhist, and You, the podcast presented by the Recovery Collective in the heart of Annapolis, Maryland. We're your hosts, Luke and Zal, and today we're delving into the stigma surrounding addiction and recovery. In the ancient world, stigma was a visible mark, a brand etched upon individuals. But in the 21st century, within the realm of mental health and addiction, it has transformed into a complex web of societal judgments. We're here to pave the way for a more compassionate, understanding form of recovery. Imagine this is a journey guided by Zal and I, an alliance of perspectives aiming to redefine the narrative. We believe in the power of these conversations, and we're thrilled to have you with us. As we navigate through the stories of resilience and renewal, we invite you to be a part of this transformative dialogue. This is not just a podcast, it's a collective journey towards understanding, healing, and breaking the chains that have held back the stories of recovery for far too long. So grab a seat, open your hearts, and let's embark on this unique exploration together. Hey, Zal.
Hey, Luke. How's it going? Good to be on the recording again.
Yeah, it's good to be back and doing another episode and another important topic, don't you think?
Definitely, yeah. Where do you want to begin about addiction?
I guess I want to go with what causes stigma of addiction? Why do you think addiction is a thing? You know, I'll first say this. A large body of research indicates that stigma is a persistent, pervasive, and rooted in a belief that addiction is a personal choice, reflecting, I guess, a lack of willpower or like a moral failing. What's your interpretation of that belief some people have? That it's a choice and a moral failing?
Yeah, I guess that comes from just like a standard society way of, what's considered good and bad. I think it comes from there, at least from my experience in my culture. Definitely was treated that way because there is that morality, doing what is right and what is wrong. And then along with addiction too, I think it's true all across culture. It does have some crime and things like that. So people start associating addiction with these, things that are not looking very good, Maybe that originates from there.
So knowing what you know now, what do you think about, I guess, growing up in a society that sees it as a moral failing? Like, how have your thoughts changed?
Yeah, I feel more compassion towards others and also for myself, my younger version of myself, because addiction really is a way of treatment to a deeper problem, So it's not like an intentional choice, but something that we deal with, except that we found unhealthy way to deal with that. So in that way, I feel more compassionate towards people who suffer from it, and also my younger version of myself too.
Which is kind of interesting because you grew up in a very Buddhist upbringing and culture that sees addiction as a moral failing. But then again, Buddhism really looks at the importance of self-compassion. It's interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But then again, I think there's plenty of stigma, obviously, here when it comes to mental health and addiction. I think stigma is simply just a lack of understanding, or it's either an misunderstanding or it's fear-based. I think often stigma is based on people's fear. What do you think?
Yeah, that's true. I think the definition that I've read somewhere, it's some kind of an unfair or negative belief about a particular thing. So it's definitely an unexamined, either lack of understanding or pre-assumption that it is this way. There's a gut reaction to that, especially people, who have children. Like there's a sense of protection that, I don't want my child to be like that, But then it even feeds the addiction more, because that's the worst feeling for an addict to have, to feel outcasted, to feel like I don't belong, and it even paves deeper path towards addiction.
So I think in some ways, stigma can actually Well, yeah, it continues to fuel the problem, or for addiction can really, and mental health concerns or illnesses, really make it worse, right? We can cut out any pauses, so it's okay. So there's this good old Merriam-Webster, the dictionary. And the Merriam-Webster definition is a set of negative and unfair beliefs that a society or group of people have about something. So a stigma is negative and unfair. Yeah, it sounds right. That sounds like what a stigma is. So it's the opposite of compassion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lack of empathy, a lack of relatability, and also, unexamined assumption. I guess those are all that comes to mind as we're thinking about stigma, negative, unfair belief, and some kind of conditioning too. I guess that's a Buddhist concept of that. There has been some kind of conditioning, either societies before or from young age. There's things that is made up, molded to a particular way that we don't question.
Huh. Why do you think it's often a go-to for people when it comes to mental health or mental illnesses and addiction? Why is stigma often a go-to? Not just like the exception and a small minority does it, but a large portion of any population, especially, this has been happening for centuries when it comes to substance use and abuse and mental illnesses. That stigma is often the first go-to for so many.
Mm. Yeah, I think about human mind from a Buddhist perspective in terms of the human conditioning can be simplified as I always look for something that is pleasant, pleasurable, ease, and I don't like pain, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So stigma is like that too, that when I see somebody who's struggling with addiction or mental health, like, oh, I don't want that. There's a repulsion instead of, oh, what's going on with that person? I want to know. That's not our immediate reaction. That I want to understand you. Tell me what's going on. But it's more like, oh, I don't like what I'm seeing. I don't want to be like that person. I don't want my children to be like that person. That really is like the immediate reaction to addiction.
Yeah, I guess especially with addiction, that it's often a significant either perceived or reality of yes challenge, yes vulnerability, and people often take that as a sign of weakness. And if it's a sign of weakness, well then, I should be able to not abuse drugs or alcohol or crack or cocaine, or I shouldn't be depressed. I should be able to, do this myself. And if there's that level of vulnerability to perceived as weakness, then yeah, that's leads to their own stigma.
Yeah, there are just so many things that happen to us while we were young. It doesn't have to be traumatic, but like there are just so many things that happen, and we're just absorbing, right? So in that way, especially if addiction becomes like a self-medication or a way to treat what was suffer younger, it's not our fault anymore, because I didn't know any better. We didn't know any better. So that thought comes to mind too when it comes to this person did not wake up one day and, oh, I'm going to be an addict. That's my mission.
Yeah.
But it's more like, okay, because we only realized that after it was too late.
Yeah. I want to touch on stigma in three categories. We've got stigma towards treatment, the family, and the stigma that they have with their loved one that has a mental health issue or addiction issue, and stigma towards medications. Treatment, family stigma, and medications. Treatment. Let's start there. I mean, who wants to go to treatment for 24 hours, let alone 30? Right? I mean, that's a pun intended. That's a hard pill to swallow.
I'm not that bad, right? I don't need treatment.
Yeah, we're seeing it as how stigma is compounded. It's showing us just, gosh, is it really this bad? And we say that, even that can be a stigma. I'm not this bad.
It's in a way of like avoiding responsibility, like unplugging, going away. I don't know. There are just so many facts or assumptions surrounding that. That, oh, wait, can you not do it by yourself? Are you that bad? Yeah, do you really need to go?
So what about stigma with family? You had quite a journey from recovery, and you're the son of two parents in the medical field. So I imagine that they had some. I mean, every family goes, man, what's my part in this? At some capacity, what did you ever talk to your parents about that aspect, the stigma of their son who, correct me if I'm wrong, they take a lot of pride in getting a higher education overseas, and take us through that journey from your perspective.
Yeah, the good news is they were very happy now, so that's a good part, but they definitely had to go through a lot. But I guess first of all, it's just very embarrassing. I think that's also part of the stigma too. That I don't know if it's true for all family, but when there is a family, there's that family image. And like you were saying too, if something's wrong, you're like, oh, what did I do wrong raising this child? And then it also becomes a way that is an expression of how I raise this child. So if he's an addict, maybe it's something that I did wrong. So let us just like fix this problem on our own without letting anybody know. And even creates more of like hiding the problem, not asking for help. But for my parents, it was even worse because, they thought it was a moral issue, and also mingling with the wrong crowd, things like that. So no concept of like addiction, disease of addiction. So that was even harder for them and harder for me.
Yeah, I think whenever there's a struggle, moral issue or not, or just a mess up, I mean, internally, I'll speak for myself, it can be a certain degree of embarrassing. And then throw on, like to your point, hanging out with the wrong crowd, or, for me, my parents getting a call at 3 a.m. from a police officer thinking that I'm dead. Like, who can they relate to that experience? That's not something that they can go, hey, so I thought my child was dead at 3 a.m., but no, apparently he has a felony charge. It's that's embarrassing. So the family stigma, can feel really isolated. And often for family members, often a core characteristic or belief system for families is to help one another. And a lot of times families do a really good job to support each other so they don't have to feel the full pain of whatever's going on in their life. That's the benefit of a family, whatever your definition of a family is. And when families don't feel like they can help their loved one, well, that can lead to, like you're saying, isolation, embarrassment, a moral failing. What did I do wrong? Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, when we feel like we can't help our loved one because of their mental health concern or substance use, it's tough. We had last year a gentleman talking about his son died by suicide, and he lost a lot of friends. Instead of supporting them, they turn their back on him. So even friends of family members go, gosh, well, what did they do wrong? And that's out there, so it can be very isolating. So stigma is real. What about medication? All kinds of stigma. How do we counteract stigma with medication. I mean, I've certainly talked about some of the frustrations with medications in our society. So I totally understand that aspect, and there's plenty of episodes where we talk about that. But how do we minimize the stigma when it comes to medication?
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced it in my own experience too. Like thinking about medication as a crutch, but I know there is that aspect where, people abusing or overusing things like that. So there might be assumption or some kind of a preconceived notion about that. But my take on that is that, after I've identified the problem or the disease, there's a medication for that. So like problem, medication, problem, kind of reduce or maintain or fixed. So in that way, it's pretty straightforward, but there definitely is stigma towards that in a way of, again, kind of similar to what we talked about earlier, the weakness. Like why can you not use your own mind, use your own willpower instead of relying on the medication? That's a sign of weakness. That's a sign of, why do you need to rely on that?
I want to empower that statement, medication like a crutch. When do we use crutches?
When legs, hands broken.
When we need
bones
it.
are broken. Yeah.
Yeah. We use crutches when we need it. And then we use it to assist us to get range of motion and ambulatory, so that way we don't hurt or damage more. I'm okay with medication being a crutch. I don't see too many people walking around crutches when they don't need it. So let's empower that statement, It's funny that's the line that we all use when it comes to medication when people abuse it. I don't see people abusing crutches too often. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I like how you're pointing that out, because there's also that idea of all or nothing or dependency. But like medication, they are, lifelong things, but there are also medications where you need, especially if you're reporting honestly to people who's giving you care, there's always that working together that, okay, you probably need this medication for this time, and we can increase this, reduce it based on that communication, based on things are. So it reminds me of that point too about the crutch. When my bones are healed, I can walk, but there is a period where I need to rely on the crutch for the healing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And medication can be used in that way. And for some people, medications for mental health or for reducing cravings or medical assisted treatment, that it can be life-saving, right? So not just a crutch for support, but completely life-saving. So the brain is like any other organ. But we don't seem to have that stigma when it's with high blood pressure in the heart, or we're not producing insulin, or whatever else it might be. But for some reason, when we talk about the organ of the brain, it's like this whole other stigma. The brain is like any other organ in the body. Now, I'm a big advocate, and I'm a big believer in doing all the other parts you can, so that way all parts of the self, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and socially, can help each other out. Like the most magnificent, we are the most magnificent puzzle on this earth, and the emotional and physical and spiritual can help the chemical potentially in balance. But yeah, man, the brain is an organ, and to think it's always working 100%, it ain't. And mine isn't right now because my family has the flu and I'm foggy. So, and I know that, and I'm okay with that. So yeah, that's a big piece. Good.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're ready for the good news part yet, but everything that you're saying really, encourages the room about the room for either changing that stigma or educating the society for better understanding. But from what I'm thinking right now is that especially it is undeniably true that addiction is affecting people. So I think the power is more in empowering recovery, like
Yes.
if we see that, I mean, that's been my experience too, that the more I see people who are in recovery and doing positive things, so like focusing more on the positive instead of how do I erase the negative, so the more we
Yeah.
focus on the positive, it just spreads and negativity kind of reduces its power.
Stigma often thrives in silence, and shame can silence individuals further. So I love the empowerment. You brought up the self-compassion and the Buddhist perspectives, and how embracing our own imperfections and struggles can be a transformative step in breaking down the walls of our own internalized stigma. And the power of vulnerability, sharing personal stories can be hugely empowering, but it also requires vulnerability. So when we show that side, we may worry that we're going to get hurt, but boy, being open about our struggles and challenge the stigma, we begin to break those old patterns, and we begin to change the stigma, and there's a strength to that. I'll give you an example. There's a reason why cigarettes aren't smoked everywhere anymore. It used to happen all the time, everywhere. Everywhere, people are smoking cigarettes in the airport, in the restaurant, in your house. I can't imagine in the 60s, it was like every wall yellow from cigarettes. And now it's almost like a stigma to smoke. OSHA standards, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. In 1970, there was a Department of Labor, and they said for the labor union, no, we have to follow safety protocols. And before, there'd be someone from, OSHA that says, nope, you got to wear this helmet. And these old school guys would be like, F you, get out of here. Or they wouldn't tie up and their harnesses right. But now you wouldn't even consider that. If people saw you not wearing a helmet or tie up right on a job site, they'd look at you and go, what the heck are you doing? Like, the stigma isn't to look big and bad. The stigma is, why aren't you caring about your safety and your health? So now being able to do this for our own well-being, our own health, our mental health, our substance use journey is, to your point, touch upon that a little bit more, the empowering part.
Hey listeners, we've got something extraordinary to share, a chance to reshape your journey no matter where you are. You're familiar with Zal Mal's insights on our podcast, but there's more. Through the Recovery Collective, he offers life, mindfulness, recovery coaching, and meditation groups guiding you toward a fulfilled and mindful existence, no matter your location. Zal's journey from a Burmese Buddhist novice to a skilled practitioner equips him with timeless wisdom and contemporary strategies. Whether you're navigating life's shifts, seeking clarity, or pursuing self-awareness, Zal's coaching serves as a compass guiding you toward success. The best part? Zal's approach centers on your growth and empowerment. He equips you with tools to tap into your inner strengths for continuous evolution no matter where you are. Ready to take that next step in your personal growth journey? Connect with Zal Mal and the Recovery Collective at 240-813-8135 from anywhere in the world. Investigating in your journey reaps immeasurable rewards. Let Zal Mal guide you toward resilience, clarity, and empowerment no matter where life finds you. Now, let's transition back into our conversation. Stay tuned, stay curious, and keep your journey growing.
Yeah, that's, it's all about enjoying life and finding happiness. So, I don't know, recovery community, it's just the best part for that. That, first of all, you don't feel alone. And second of all, you feel hopeful that it is possible, to accept that we do have this problem, this a disease of addiction, but I don't have to die as an addict. I can die as a sober alcoholic or sober addict, or so that's very empowering. But also, it goes back to what we were kind of bringing that up too, about like addiction was like a treatment for something that needed to be addressed before that. So like if I'm addressing that and enjoying life, there's less temptation. And I think it's even true for people who are who haven't found addiction as a disease yet, you know. But if they start enjoying life, and I think about my children that way too, that if I can do my best to provide positive enjoyment, they do. And then addiction is not as appealing, you know, if I'm enjoying life, because it really is a treatment, an escape, or checking out, you know. It does have that effect. That's why we did it. That's why I did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's getting to that point, and when we're not at the point, being okay that we're not okay. If things aren't where we want them to be, how do we reach out for help? And that be okay. And I think that takes education and awareness, and it takes campaigns, and it takes realization of how mental illness and chemical imbalances work, and how addiction works on the brain. And even though we feel that one day, and all of a sudden we get surprised, 24 hours later, the next week, and we hit this low bottom, we're like, man, how did I get here again? And getting help with that. And I think part of culture is promoting positive role models. I mean, I think, gosh, it's like in the state of Maryland, we have Michael Phelps, and he's been very vocal about his journey with some chemical use, and certainly his mental health. And he's an advocate for seeking therapy and treatment. And his sister is wonderful, and she's in recovery, and she's do life coaching and recovery coaching. And I just think about people in, Eminem, the Detroit Lions, are in the playoffs, and he's an advocate for recovery. And my God, now we're up for best pictures and stuff like that. And Bradley Cooper and musicians like Macklemore. And there are all these people that are, is it beginning to be cool to care about your mental health and sobriety? I think it's beginning to do a paradigm shift. What do you think?
It's inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very neat.
Yeah, you touched on this a little bit too earlier about the connection between stigma and silence. You know, I want to expand more on that too, because that's a power that I've seen in my own recovery journey, and also in recovery community. There is a sense of trust. You know, I think trust opens communication. Trust open the courage to ask for help. But silence has to do with judgment. You know, fear. So like that's also what I feel good about these great examples in recovery community, or where people have those stories, and it invites people who are struggling that you're not alone, but also that you can open up and trust and ask for help, because it can be a very lonely world where I think I'm the only one dealing with this and there's no one else. It can be very frightening.
It's there's plenty of things that I love doing about being a therapist, but that kind of transition, seeing clients go from, what do I tell my friends, my coworkers, my loved ones, my boss, and going from, I'm not going to shout out on top of the rooftop, no one ever asked you to, to them getting more and more comfortable with their own stigma and minimizing their own shame and their own fear, and being more comfortable in just being a person that doesn't use anymore, or a person that has depression, anxiety, or bipolar, or whatever it is, and they're treating it. And then seeing that shift of fear, unknown, doubt, uncertainty, how do they address people to, they just get comfortable. And it's their own stigma, not the other people's stigma that they struggle with, and their own fears, and the silence and the shame. And that's a big thing we do as, you as a life coach, recovery coach, and me as a therapist.
Yeah. And I think like it even extends beyond people in recovery. There are just so many principles in recovery, or tools that people who struggle with addiction use. that go across the board. I think it even is inspiring to non-addict, non-alcoholic, because there's a sense of, not giving up, but also that courage to ask for help. And then, almost like embracing and making the best out of the worst. And there's something very humanly inspiring about that goes beyond people outside of addiction as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said. We're beginning to challenge stereotypes, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't get this way overnight, doesn't change overnight, huh? Any other thoughts as we wrap up this conversation? And it's something that I think, we talk about. One of the things we often say in the beginning of our intro of every episode, we often say a collective solution to health and wellness. And part of health and wellness is allowing yourself to get healthier and get healthier, get well, and that's takes vulnerability, it takes courage, and it takes conversations to humanize this, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, since you mentioned stereotypes too, I guess the final message that comes to mind for me is about, I'm all about connections these days, because especially I feel like I missed out a lot on the connection deep in my addiction and also in my fearful days. So I want to promote that, and I want to encourage people to do that, especially in this day of like social media and internet and things like that. Like, the world is not as it seems. There's so many things that are hidden, and I don't know what it is until I interact. So like a person out there somewhere would seem like he's mean, but he's actually a very nice person. But I won't find out until I communicate. So I really want to spread that message of interacting with each other, because we never know. The appearance doesn't always reflect the internal world of people. So for me, that's been the best mystery and also a curiosity. When I wake up, I just want to talk to people to really see their internal world, and it fulfill my world too.
Well said. Well said. Let's close on that, shall we? In conclusion, let's carry forward the wisdom gained from today's exploration. Acknowledge the power of your story, embrace vulnerability, and cultivate empathy. These are the building blocks of a society free from the chains of stigma. Remember, recovery is a journey, and every step forward is a triumph. Let's continue this dialogue, challenge perceptions, and build a world where everyone's journey is met with compassion and understanding. Thank you for being a part of A Therapist, a Buddhist, and you. Until next time, stay resilient, stay compassionate, and remember, your story is a powerful catalyst for your change. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share with others, as collectively we can do a lot together. My name is Luke.
And this is Zal.
See you next time.